Hi, welcome back to my channel, Beautiful Minutia. If you're new here, my name is Tiffany, and today I am doing something that I actually saw Katie from Paperbacks and Ponytails recently do, and I thought that it sounded so much fun. So I decided to steal it from her, and that is recommending certain books to certain Christmas characters. I'll have Katie's channel and her video linked down in the comments. Hers was super fun. I am doing some of the same characters, but some of my characters are different. But even the characters that are the same, I'm recommending completely different books than she did. And I just thought it was such a fun idea and it seemed really festive. So I'm going to start with a very iconic Christmas character, one that is known and beloved to probably almost all. I guess maybe there are some people who don't love him, but I'm gonna go with the Grinch. The Grinch is one of those very cranky protagonists who just, are annoyed by people around them, but, really need to be shown love by others. And so I am going to recommend to the Grinch A Man Called Ove by Frederick Bachman. So this story is about a cranky elderly man who is very irritated by a lot of his neighbors, and he just has a really hard time with other people and is very cranky, not very forgiving, but he's been through a lot in his life, and throughout the story we kind of get his backstory, why he is the way that he is, and we just see that cranky exterior melt in the face of people around him loving him despite his annoyance with them. So I think that this is a book that not only would the Grinch very greatly relate to, but I think maybe he could learn a few things from it as well if he reads it before his heart grows to sizes. Next up, I'm going to recommend a book to Ebenezer Scrooge from A Christmas Carol. So Ebenezer Scrooge is a skinflint and very cheap and very greedy and wants to get as much money as he possibly can and places all his hope and value in money. So to Ebenezer, I'm going to recommend Silas Marner by George Eliot. This is a story of a man named Silas Marner who is a miserly hermit who has this gold that he hoards and he hides away. And it's the story of kind of his heart changing by encountering a young child. And so I'm not going to say any more about the story than that, but I think that it's one that the beginning circumstances of how Ebenezer is and how Silas is towards the beginning and their attitudes towards the world and towards money are kind of similar in a lot of ways. So I think Ebenezer would see himself reflected, and again, just like my recommendation for the Grinch, might actually help steer him in the right direction. Next up, I am going to recommend a book to Buddy the Elf from the movie Elf. This is one of my favorite Christmas movies, which may possibly be a controversial choice because a lot of people just don't like Will Ferrell and don't think he's funny. And that's fair. Different people have different tastes and opinions, but Elf makes me laugh so hard and I love it so much. So when I think of Buddy the Elf, I just think of like this effusive joy and laughter, and yet at the same time kind of a quest to grow and find out who he is. And so to Buddy, I am going to recommend Anne of Green Gables by L.M. Montgomery. I just feel like Anne has the same imaginative spirit, the same love for people. I think that Buddy would think that Anne of Green Gables is actually really funny and heartwarming in spots. So it just seems like the kind of book that he would really enjoy. Seems like the kind of book pretty much anyone would enjoy, actually. Although maybe I can't really see Ebenezer or the Grinch maybe loving Anne quite as much, but most normal people love Anne. Next up, I am going to recommend a book to Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer. So Rudolph is very much cast out because he's different from everyone else and people don't take the time to understand him. They just don't like him because he's different and he has a hard time connecting with others and just feels like a misfit who's been cast out. And so to him, I'm going to recommend Wonderstruck by Brian Selznick. This is a beautiful, beautiful story about a young boy who becomes deaf and him navigating how his world is different, and Brian Selznick is very unique in how he writes his books. And so in this story, we have the story of the young boy that's going on through the text of the story, and intermixed are illustrations, which are telling a different story about a young girl. And by the time we reach the end of the story about the young boy and the young girl do converge in a very meaningful and beautiful way about, you know, finding a place to belong and navigate being different from everyone else. Next up, I'm going to recommend a book to Frosty the Snowman. And so when I think of Frosty, I think about how he has come alive because there are these children who believe in him, and he loves the children and has connected to them so much. And so I'm going to recommend to him Sweep by Jonathan Auxier. Sweep is the story of a young girl who is a chimney sweep in London, I believe during the Victorian era. And she encounters this monster, this golem, through circumstances that I'm not really gonna talk about, but their relationship, and it reminds me of Frosty. It's reminiscent of that in a lot of ways. I was going to recommend a book to Charlie Brown, but I feel like the main purpose of A Charlie Brown Christmas is that he's searching for the meaning of Christmas. He knows that it's so much more than Christmas plays or materialism or the commercialism that you see everywhere. He knows that there's something more, and he's trying to figure it out. And so I was going to suggest a book for him, but I honestly can't think of a better book to suggest to him than Linus reading the Christmas story from Luke to him. I really can't think of anything better. And Linus saying at the end, "That's what Christmas is all about, Charlie Brown." So I can't top that. So I'm not going to recommend a book to him, but I wanted to, and I'm still including him in this discussion so that way you didn't think I was a monster and I just don't care about A Charlie Brown Christmas, because I do. I watch it every single year. Next up, I am going to suggest a book to George Bailey from It's a Wonderful Life. So George Bailey has some things happen. He feels like his life is falling apart, and he wishes that he had never been born. So George Bailey needs a book that reminds him that he matters and that his life is really good. So to George Bailey, I'm actually going to recommend, this was probably a surprising choice, but I'm going to recommend The Death of Ivan Ilyich by Leo Tolstoy. This is a book that kind of examines what does it mean to have lived a life well. Is it based on your career? Is it based on your money? Is it based on your family? Is it based on your spiritual state? What does it mean when you come to the end of your life and you're grappling with, did I live my life well? What does that mean? And so that's why I kind of associated that with George Bailey. Next up, I'm going to recommend a book to Clark Griswold from National Lampoon's Christmas Vacation. So for Clark, things are really crazy. He's got a lot of dysfunctional family. He's got a lot of things that are just going wrong with the holidays. So I feel like poor Clark really just needs an escape from all the craziness and all the drama that's happening around him. I almost recommended to him As I Lay Dying by William Faulkner because I thought maybe it might make him feel better about his family dysfunction, to see that there are families out there that are worse than him. But I think he needs a distraction from the dysfunction, so I'm actually going to recommend to him Mistborn by Brandon Sanderson. This is a fast-paced fantasy book set in a really interesting world. It was actually my very first adult high fantasy book that I had ever read, and Brandon Sanderson makes it super accessible and easy to follow, at least in the Mistborn series. I feel like you have to work a little harder in the Stormlight Archives, at least in the beginning. But Mistborn, I feel like it's easy to figure things out. It's really interesting. It's so immersive. It sucks you in and pulls you in. And I think that that's exactly what Clark Griswold needs. He needs something that's just an escape from everything happening around him. Next up, I'm going to recommend a book to Scott Calvin, who is the protagonist of the Santa Claus movie. And I had not seen this movie since I was a kid, and I watched it last year with Claire, and it held up so much better than I thought it was going to. I thought it was going to seem super cheesy, but I really enjoyed it. We actually ended up watching it twice. We enjoyed it that much. So Scott Calvin basically becomes Santa Claus through a series of events, but he doesn't believe that he's really becoming Santa Claus, and he doesn't believe that Santa is even real. So what Scott needs is something that makes him believe in magic again. And what better way for him to believe in magic again than by reading possibly the most magical middle grade book, The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe by C.S. Lewis. I think that this is just a book that I don't even know. I think it just feels so magical and so beautiful, and I think it would make him believe in magic. And the last person that I am going to recommend a book to is Clara from The Nutcracker. Sometimes I've seen her referred to as Marie, depending on the version of The Nutcracker. So Clara or Marie, whichever one. Clara goes on this amazing adventure. She receives a nutcracker for Christmas from her grandfather, I believe. I've seen it in different versions that it's a family friend from other people, but she falls asleep under the Christmas tree with this nutcracker, and she wakes up and it's a real life nutcracker, and then he ends up battling this army of rats, and then they go off to this magical kingdom, and there's so many different elements to it. But I feel like Clara would really love a fantastical adventure story, and I thought specifically of Gregor the Overlander by Suzanne Collins, who actually also wrote The Hunger Games, but she wrote the Gregor series first. It's a middle grade fiction series about this young boy Gregor who ends up falling through a vent in his New York City apartment laundry room and ends up in this totally different world underneath the surface of New York City and goes on this adventure. It's really amazing. There are giant rats in it also. So that was another reason why I thought of Clara. I was like, wait, it has giant rats. It's perfect. So I would recommend that Clara read Gregor the Overlander. So there you have it. There are some well-loved Christmas movie characters that I recommended some books to. I'd love to hear from you in the comments down below. Are there any Christmas characters I missed? Probably. And what books would you recommend to those characters? Or would you have recommended maybe different books to some of the characters that I mentioned? Thank you so much for watching. If you like this video, please hit like and also subscribe so you can continue to see more bookish content from me, and I will see you again next time.